I'd like to do first is have all the members introduce themselves.
Hello, Molly Friedland.
Nelson Gill.
John DeLeo,
Rick Lyles.
Patrick Lyons.
and considering as Mark is not here, both Molly and Patrick will be voting members tonight. Adoption of the minutes from the February 2nd, 2022 regular meeting.
Move adoption.
Second.
All those in favor? Election of officers, consider the fact that John Fink resigned last month, we have to fill the chairman's position.
Nominate John DeLeo as chairperson
Second.
for the next 30 years.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be around as long as John. All those in favor? For vice chair,
I nominate Rick Lyles.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Well, I voted that, I shouldn't have voted.
Now, you can vote for yourself.
Can you?
Sure.
Okay.
And we'll do.
If I'd known that, I would have voted the
It's more
last
interesting
time.
if you didn't vote for yourself.
And now we need to replace Rick as secretary. Any volunteers? Nelson Gill, nominate Nelson Gill for secretary.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So the old white guys do it again, right?
Well, Molly can't hold three positions.
Someday.
I'll go to the next item. Final plan review for major use site development entitled Beaumont Kingsland Self-Storage for Beaumont Commercial Ellsworth LLC. The proposal is to construct a 31,650 square foot self-storage facility consisting of 3 buildings of climate-controlled self-storage units and 1 building of drive-up self-storage units on a 2.02 acre parcel, tax map 16, lot 8-1-2, located on the Kingsland Crossing. The subject property is located in the commercial zoning district. Anybody here representing the applicant?
Good evening, board members. My name is Jim Kaiser. I'm here representing the project. With me is Rich Trott, owner in the project. We're here for final approval of this, and after the last meeting, there were several items that were outstanding on it. I think the most significant ones were a request for a little bit additional traffic information. We actually withdrew the formally withdrew the waiver on the lighting, since we had the lighting plan prepared in the meantime. And then a little bit of work to address stormwater, very minor stormwater impact, which we were able to do.
I noticed the improvement.
It was coincidental in that, I mean, we were trying to contain everything that was on site, and the numbers last time were pretty much everything that we were controlling was really held to essentially next to nothing on the 2-year storm. So what we ended up having to do is just put a little minor control on the water coming into the site from off-site to kind of chop that down so that it created no increase in runoff from this site for this project's development. For the traffic numbers, we did compare it on a per unit lease basis, and in the numbers you can see that, which was a little bit of a surprise to me, the per unit basis numbers were just a little bit lower. But our information from the existing facility on the Bangor Road showed that there was a fair decrease in the national averages from what was utilizing the property from that standpoint. So we think we've got that traffic pretty well contained on it from that standpoint. And be more than happy to answer any questions that the board may have at this time.
Well, Jim, comparing the one on 1A, what's the difference in the size, like the square footage, I mean, between the two locations?
The building itself is about the same size as what we're proposing for a building here.
Okay.
But we have 3 of them,
Yes, yeah.
rather than 2 down there, I think, right?
They're equal in size, so 2 buildings and climate controlled versus 3 buildings, we work the math.
Right.
Yeah.
Give it a per unit scenario.
And roughly the same number of units.
No, there'd be like a third more units.
Okay. I
But we
thought you said the
prorated-
square footage was pretty much the same. No, I'm sorry.
No, square footage per building
Oh, okay,
was about
okay,
the
okay,
same.
gotcha, sorry.
And we
sorry.
have 3 buildings versus 2.
I got you now.
buildings.
Did you have any questions on traffic?
No, I'm good.
No?
Yeah. It's not very impactful.
Jim, actually, one question I did have on the stormwater. If I read this correctly, the 2-year storm, originally it was 2.1, then it went to 1.8, but the 5.4-inch storm went from 7.3 to 7.8, so it actually increased, but it's still below the pre-development. Is that?
It's a tenth lower than pre-development on the 5.4. And then the 2-year is the same as what it was pre-developed. We dropped it another 0.3 from what was presented at the last meeting.
What would have caused the increase from the 7.3 to 7.8 cubic feet per second on the 5.4 inch storm?
The 7.3?
I think originally, the
Why?
original information you gave us
Yeah,
had the 5.4 inch storm at 7.3 cubic feet.
I
And
think those two, the last meeting we had those, the 5.4 storm was equal with the pre-development rates, and this time it dropped by 10 on it.
well, it's still under the pre-development.
Yeah.
I guess the only other question I had was on the non-climate controlled building, the small building. You're not, if I read this right, you're not planning on putting any lights on the building?
Correct.
I guess-
Right now, they don't put lights on any of their traditional storage buildings, or power to them, I guess you'd say, right? Yeah, so it's,
Aren't there exterior lights on the buildings on 1A?
There's exterior lights on all of the buildings, but we're anticipating that the light emitted from the climate buildings will shine over towards the other buildings.
so it's just gonna
Be
keep
illuminated
those.
enough for security and for ease of use for tenants.
So the doors on the unlit building kind of face towards the light from the other
Exactly.
building?
Exactly.
And they're only doors
And there's
on
no
that
lights
one
around
side.
that, so to speak.
Okay, you said there are only doors on the side facing the
Correct.
bigger building.
Yeah.
And there's no power at all to that 4th building?
The proposal right now is not to power those.
I guess I would just ask staff, I mean, does that meet our ordinance? Because I mean, if you look at the lighting standards,
I think if, it would be a different story if it were like a parking lot for large retail use or something, but where we don't have a good standard for, it's kind of loading area. There's not even a distinct standard to which they could be held. So in that instance, less light is better than too much light. I think.
There's no, under the police section, there's no comments here, but I presume they participated in the TRT and
Yep,
saw the lighting plan.
yep, so there were no comments.
I think going back to your question, John, on the runoff, I see where you're getting that 7.3 now. I went back into the original. I think because what happened is we're controlling it a little bit differently, that we're controlling that off-site a little bit stronger at the lower level, that when the higher level comes through, it's just giving us a little bit heavier rush through the system on it from that standpoint.
Thank you. Elena, I guess I would just ask under 812.5 lighting standards, and how many foot candles are supposed to be? People will have access to this, I think it said we open from 6 to 10, is that?
Well, it won't be gated,
Right,
so the climate buildings are access controlled. There would be hours of operation, but the outside would be potentially a 24/7 access.
okay. So I guess I would ask in the table,
Is there really an applied use for this?
Right. I mean, it's not vehicular sale, it's not under service station canopy, it's not an illuminated sign surface, so all we have to go on are parking lots, active building entrances, which I guess that's arguable, or private walkways. You know, the last way in which I had touched that was, there was some question at the time of TRT of will this building be lit or not? And there had been some discussion of lighting it internally, right? So that was last week or right before, and this is where we're at since then. They are not proposing lighting.
I mean, we didn't really see a big fit on that building and its usage in far as the table was concerned, so we weren't as concerned about the lighting standards. We feel there's gonna be enough overcast from it, even though you're looking at the numbers, there's still a glow coming off those lights at those levels. So that there is visibility there.
How far is it
But-
from where the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The 30 feet is from wall to wall on that area from.
Let's say,
that
so
state.
from the front to the front,
Yeah.
this one's lit and 30
Yeah.
feet away,
Correct.
and those lights on the lit building basically shine down and out, more or
Correct.
less.
Yeah.
So it's not like the other ones are unlit, they just don't have,
They just don't have
Lights
fixtures
on them.
directly on them, correct.
and the question is, I suppose, do you get enough foot candles of whatever, doing it kind of indirectly? And or do you really need it?
Yeah, I think if there's a big, if there's a concern by the board as far as that's concerned, we'd probably just turn around and bump the wattage a little bit on those lights right across from that one, and just have it cast a little bit more light from there. because
And
since we're
presumably
not
aim it a
running
little
power
bit
to that
differently or
building.
whatever.
Excuse me?
Presumably aim it a little bit differently or whatever.
Yeah, those, the fixtures themselves
Are
that we
fixed?
provided, my recollection is they don't have a tilt
Okay.
mechanism on them. They're purely
Sure.
friendly down casting. But if we up the wattage a little bit on them, we can create a little bit further reach out from that
I mean,
standpoint.
I'm just kind of curious, because your facility on 1A, the outside buildings, not the climate control, are well lit. So why would you go to no light on this one? Even though it's a lot smaller building than the outside ones that you have up on 1A.
In comparison, the buildings on 1A are somewhere in the 140-foot length. This one is only 80, meaning in our typical light spacing is somewhere between 30 and 40 feet. So this would only constitute perhaps 2 lights if we stuck with the same pattern. But the hope is that the light emanating from the other buildings is gonna be enough to at least illuminate the area. With only 8 units and 85% of our traffic time is during daylight hours, the small percentage of people that may be coming to 8 units over the life may not warrant the light, but at the same time too, we're hopeful that there is some light there that illuminates the area. It's really for security and access and making sure that they can see, but the lights aren't in the unit, so, nighttime access into the units isn't prevalent for those reasons.
I mean, Jim, do you think if you up the wattage in the climate control building right across from that, would that maybe get it up close to the 0.2 candle power. What I'm afraid of, Alina, is that somebody comes in, wanting to put up 50,000 square feet of storage units and say, I'm not gonna light it at all.
Sure,
But our ordinance, I think, requires it to be lit.
yeah, that wouldn't be reasonable.
I mean, if,
I think yes, I'm gonna say with, a fair amount of confidence that if we just up, I think there's, 2 fixtures right there, maybe a 3rd fixture that we just can bring enough light over on those, just bump the wattage on those a little bit from that standpoint.
I think it's-
If that's what it takes, if it's a condition where the staff can look at it, the new lighting plan would be, we can do that, yeah.
So are you looking for it to meet the minimum for parking lot?
I mean, I think it should. I mean, you're the expert.
It's not really a parking lot per se in the same sense.
No,
Mm-hmm.
You can't drive behind this 4th building, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they are oversized, so they're not, the everyday smaller unit size. These are larger size. There's only one, so it's a full depth storage unit.
I mean, I don't think it would take much. I mean, you're just a little bit out from that building. Some of these you're at 0.1 anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, these fixtures provide a pretty steep drop off on the edge, so.
I'd be happy with that.
I just want to address in the TRT from February 24th under wastewater, the 222 comment. And Jim, I presume you've seen the TRT. Private force main should be insulated where stormwater storage and basin is provided over or next to the main. And then a question, is the precise location known?
The answer to that question is no, we don't know the exact location. We assume it's somewhere right close to the middle of that easement through there. We'll have to do some test pits during excavation, and if we get too close with that swale, then we'll have to provide a little bit of insulation. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's unfortunate, they should have tied in the manhole down in the street when that was being constructed, but they chose not to.
And the plans you brought this evening have a note to that effect.
Yes.
So in regards to those comments, they removed snow storage from that area and added a note about to confirm that the forest main either has enough cover and insulate if required, if it doesn't have enough cover, right?
Right.
So
Thank you.
I think that would mean if you're prepared to approve it tonight, that these could be signed.
So what was the last thing? If you're
Although,
prepared-
maybe not with a condition regarding the lighting. Sorry.
I didn't hear the last phrase in if we're gonna approve it tonight, and then I didn't hear the next.
Oh, so they brought these with the intent of getting them signed this evening, so they
Oh,
were
okay.
updated to relieve those comments that were made on the TRT report. To address the,
If they do sign them, I mean, I don't need a signed copy, so if they do sign them, you can just hold the actual until
yeah, if you're gonna have
the
a,
lighting plan comes in.
yes, if you're going to ask for a condition of approval regarding, just changing the lighting plan a little bit, then I would say we wouldn't sign these tonight.
So would somebody like to make a motion?
I make the motion that we approve it. But I'm still not sure whether we need the caveat or not, though, about the lighting.
I think we do, because it needs to, somebody needs to look at it and ensure it's been done.
Okay.
Somebody being
You, okay. So, move that, what is the final plan review, or the final plan for a major use site development entitled Beaumont Kingsland Self-Storage for Beaumont Commercial Ellsworth LLC be approved with the condition that the lighting is up to the city standard and reflected on whatever drawings and so forth. And they'll make that nice, I'm pretty sure.
I'll second that.
You have a public hearing?
Open this up to a public hearing. Thanks for reminding me.
Should have done that before.
Yes, you're right.
Well, yes. Damn,
If anybody-
first night as
Yeah,
chairperson, it's going to
I
happen.
already blew it. If nobody wants to talk about this project, I'll close the public hearing.
There you go, lucky you. Okay,
Okay, now I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Too much pressure.
Yeah, seriously, that's right.
You'll get through practice.
Oh, yeah. I'm good with that. I can handle that. Oh, this next one's more fun. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Have a nice night.
And so back to you.
Okay, next item is preliminary plan review for a major use site development entitled A and B LLC for Aaron Wiswell. Has he joined us by any chance?
I saw him on the Zooms.
I was there briefly.
The proposal is to construct a 1,512 square foot automated car wash building on a 0.66 acre parcel, tax map 135, lots 13 and 14, and tax map 134, lot 150, located at 59 and 61 High Street and 62 Dean Street. The subject property is located in the downtown zoning district. Is there someone here representing the applicant?
Andrew McCullough, representing the applicant. And as you state, the applicant is on Zoom, and the applicant also requested that the equipment supplier that he has for the car wash equipment is on Zoom also. So that he can answer any particular questions regarding operation, et cetera. We did provide supplemental information to you in the plans. We revised the site plan specifically to provide 2 aisles of stacking. To do that and to allow for maneuvering of the vehicles, we moved the building 2 feet to the north, if you will, 2 feet toward Vinyl Tainter's property. And we also provided additional apron space toward High Street so that we do have 2 aisles and so that the vehicles can enter the 2, they can simultaneously stack and enter the 2 bays. We kept an aisle width of 9 feet around the north side of the building so that vehicles, if they chose to bow out, could exit the site. We do have additional letters, or you have additional letters in the file now from historic preservation, from natural areas, from the fire inspector, from the sewer department. We also, as a significant change, we revised the hours of operation for the facility. And that was in our narrative that was submitted. So that we are, the facility will be closed between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. The other thing, or the other item, or a couple other items that I tried to address in more detail was I did research the sound levels generated from the vacuums, and the sound levels generated from the vacuums are approximately 60 decibels. And I did provide you, using the noise level calculator that I had used, the noise level at the westerly property line will be approximately 63 decibels without any accounting for noise attenuation from the building or the fence. We had a landscape buffer adjacent to High Street. We continue to have that. We revised the description of the fence to a solid panel PVC fence around the north side and what would be the west side of the facility. And in looking at options to, because we have requested a waiver to the landscape ordinance for utilizing the fence, but we also need to include in that waiver not having a strictly 10-foot wide planting strip adjacent to Dean Street. In looking at the plan and trying to best meet the standard, or best attempt to come as close as we can to meeting the standard of the landscaping standard. I have looked at, and it's not on your plan because I looked at it after the submission of the plan, but we have between a 3 and a 4 foot wide strip, if you will, between the sidewalk and either the retaining wall or the edge of the pavement. What my thought is to include some plantings in that 3 foot wide strip. It would provide definition. It would provide a break, if you will, between the site and pedestrians walking by. And it would visually soften the look from the street. I have looked at some planting recommendations that are being used in the planting work that's being done around the city right now, as far as looking at plants that are more salt tolerant, things that would be more hardy, if you will, last even in a harsh environment. I also looked at a report from Cornell that provided some recommendations, and there are some shrubs and small tree recommendations that are salt tolerant that I would look to put in there that would provide a break. They would provide some songbird habitat, if you will, some feed, and things like that. We did also revise our traffic narrative. The limiting factor or the operating factor that will limit peak hour trips is each bay can do approximately 10 vehicles per hour maximum. So, if we look at a peak hour, that's the maximum that can occur. I did talk about, I did review, again, this Palm Beach County trip generation rate spreadsheet, and in this analysis of a car wash that was done there, their spreadsheet indicated that 100% of the trips were destination trips, as we talked about last month a little bit. My opinion, if you will, is I think that makes complete sense in the wintertime when it's mostly all residents here. I think that we could be looking at potentially 20% pass-by trips utilizing the site in the summertime, as the representative manager from Ellsworth Car Wash talked about last week. People from away coming by and saying, oh, my windshield's dirty, my car's dirty and dusty, and I want it clean. And so I think there could be some potential pass-by trips accounting for use in the summertime. So my summary was this, is given these factors and the way I broke down the trips going east and west on Dean Street, that there would be a potential for 28 vehicles maximum passing through the Dean Street, High Street intersection during the peak hour as a direct impact from the facility. And my conclusion was that I don't believe that 12 to 16 vehicles passing through the intersection will result in a decrease of greater than one level as is required by the ordinance. As we discussed a little bit last month, I do propose a no left turn at the Dean Street, High Street intersection. Left turns at an unsignalized intersection such as this with a high vehicle volumes on High Street, the number of opportunities, safe opportunities to make a left turn movement are limited. And if a vehicle is sitting there waiting to turn left, it could cause significant delay for the vehicles behind it, which would decrease level of service. So if they are directed to, if you will, or required to turn right, they have every opportunity to go to a traffic light and make a turning movement in the opposite direction.
Let me just say one thing on that.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily disagree with that.
Yeah.
But I don't believe the planning board has the power to require that.
Okay.
That is something that the city council would have to approve.
Okay.
But we do want to suggest it.
I mean, we
Just
could, we could suggest it to the council, it doesn't necessarily mean that they would approve it. But,
I
mean,
get that.
you know, if you wanted to put a no left turn sign coming out of the car wash, you know, so try and get people not to turn left onto Dean Street, that'd be permissible, but to put one at Dean and
On the
High,
actual street, right.
we don't have the power to do that.
Okay.
But wasn't there a letter or something somewhere in this file that said that the state was okay with that? I mean, notwithstanding that the council would still approve.
And it may very well be something the state would have to approve too.
Well, I think the message I got from them, was so High Street being ultimately their road, that's why I posed the question. And I think it's kind of case by case, but in this case, absent some data or conclusions leaning one way strongly, they would basically support us either way. And John, what you're saying about council approval is because there's a chapter of the code that governs this, right? But those changes would generally be presented by the police chief? Is that?
Should be.
Right, so,
That'd be some sort of traffic control order, right, that has to be signed by the chief?
yeah, traffic code or.
So-
Well, it would have to
and
go
do-
to
and
city
do-
council for for
But the-
hearing.
So the city council has to approve every traffic control order in the city? I mean, I'm just asking for.
Well, it doesn't happen very often, to tell you the truth. I mean, at one point, and I can't even remember when, we put a no left turn at the top of East
Foster.
Maple. Foster.
Foster, right.
And
That was a long, that was
Yeah.
20 plus?
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah,
I think that might actually be missing from that chapter of code,
But,
so.
yeah, I think it's something in the city ordinances that give the power to the council, not to the planning board.
It's under state statute too.
Yes.
I mean, I think they can all kind of be done in concert.
Yeah, but we don't, I think you're right, John, we don't have the authority
Yeah.
to require a sign to go up, but we can make a condition of approval that the applicant receive approval for a sign from the city council before the permit is effective.
I can look into it further before we get to final plan review. I mean, we have time.
Because I think one issue that if this went to the council for a no left turn at Dean and High, one of the issues that they're gonna deal with strenuously, and probably from a lot of people, is if you do that at Dean Street, are you gonna do that at Pine Street, at Elm Street, at Washington Street?
Personally, I wish they would. From a traffic safety
Yeah.
perspective, I mean, hello.
I think it would be wise, but
High Street is a zoo, and left turns are animals that are loosed from the zoo.
I would just offer a slightly different perspective, that the residents on that street have been able to turn left as long as they've lived there, and now, as a result of this development, that may go away for them, so just a different perspective. I don't drive up that street a lot, but there's people on that street that do every day.
I think it would also add to cars in that residential area all the time, if they're looking for other ways to get through.
That's true. That's certainly true.
If you solve one problem here, you
Yeah.
create 2 or 3 others. So,
Is there a requirement for a traffic study for this project?
Yeah, if you look at, Article 9, Section 907.1.f is where that's coming from. The very end of that paragraph says that you can waive that requirement when it's a development that generates less than 50 ADT.
907.1.f.
Correct. Should be page 9 in that section. Took me a while to kind of find that. The applicability isn't extremely clear. And some of, Andrew has done some of that analysis. We've got the trip generation.
I mean, if I could add one more thing. I did look today briefly at the trip generation manual, and just for a comparison of previously what was there as far as the subway sub-shop, and not taking into account the residential units that were there. This weekday AM peak hour of generator, 63.5 per 1,000 square feet, and the PM peak hour of generator was 52.4 per 1,000 square feet. If we say that subway between their prep area in the back and the service area that they had in the front was even 800 square feet, we're looking at a larger number of trips that were there historically than what we're proposing on an absolute worst-case scenario.
And did you have anything else? I kind of interrupted your presentation on the,
I mean, as far as in general terms, I think I covered, or I tried to summarize, let's put it that way, the additional information. So, yeah, I think I've covered most everything, other than answering any other questions.
Mr. Wiswell, would you like to add anything before we get to questions?
I don't think so. I mean, unless there's anything that you can think of that you didn't hear answered, but, I mean, we'll handle that in the question section, I guess.
Could we turn the volume up on that? Try it again, just say something.
Yeah, I don't have anything really to add, but, we can handle any questions that might be asked.
Okay, thank you. Board, questions?
On the trip generation stuff, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds with it, but when you're talking about, this is in the letter thing that you resubmitted, you say something, this operating factor will limit peak hour trips at facility to 40. Tell me again where that 40
So I
came
said
from?
20 vehicles. Each bay, it takes a vehicle approximately 5 minutes to go through the bay.
Right,
So, and there's some delay time, et cetera,
got that.
entering and exiting.
Yep,
So that's 20 vehicles per hour.
yep.
So I said 20 in, 20 out.
Oh, I see. And that's hence 40.
Right.
Okay. All right.
But, yeah, that was my thinking. 20 vehicles.
Yeah.
But
Let me just say that, I think that this is, going along in the right direction here with relative to the traffic and so forth. But, you can basically have 18 vehicles on site, 7 and 9 in the 2 queues and 2 actually in the wash, whatever you call it, station. So that's 18. And, the number of trips per hour is roughly 20. And, it's not always going to, the storage is not going to always be 18. And so I think it's a tight site. I mean, don't get me
No,
wrong.
I do too.
But I think there's probably a good chance that it won't spill out into the street. Who knows? But
We did, we did offer as a condition that before a certificate of occupancy is received, that the owner / applicant provides contact information for a manager that could address whether it's salting or sanding issues, whether it was, hey, you gotta get something out of the street because it's an issue or something like that. So that would be provided to the city for the department's availability prior to opening.
And along those lines, it might be, and I don't know what the sign would say, but it might be good to have signage at the entrance as you come in that says basically you can't wait in the street.
Yep, yes, because, we're gonna need to have signage on the side of the building, if you will, facing Dean Street, so that the vehicles know, okay, we have 2 aisles here. This aisle is for the one type of wash, this aisle is for the other
So
type of wash.
that's how you're gonna take care of that.
So, yes, there's gonna be signage there, and we can also include, and stacking isn't the right word on the street.
No,
But
yeah.
no vehicles on the street, yes.
And you said,
We also will be providing a person on site for, exponentially busy days. There'll be somebody there, part-time, if you will, making sure that the site is cleaned, everything is good, no trash, all that stuff. But then on the days after a storm and stuff that we know that there's gonna be an absurd amount of washes done, we will have somebody there directing traffic and making sure everything goes smooth.
Yeah, getting back to the signage, where were you proposing to put the signs directing to which bay they go to?
They would be on the, what I would call the southerly end, the side facing Dean Street, where the vehicles could see it as they enter the site.
Beyond the building.
We can also, do it on the, when we do our striping, we can also, put it on the pavement. And then our teller systems have like a canopy that go over them, and we put, we have touch-free on one and soft touch on the other, so they can see it visually in front of them when they're approaching.
I mean, one thing I'm concerned about with the stacking, if it's full, you have a lot of cars there, and if somebody gets in the wrong lane, you're pretty much stuck. And if somebody is in the touch-free and wants to go to the soft touch, that means they're gonna try and get in front of somebody who's probably not gonna wanna let them in, but,
But, I mean, and that's where, having someone on duty during those days when it's busy, they're gonna have to work with that person to get them.
Yeah, I mean, those incidences are few and far between, really. I mean, the idea that we're gonna be 16 to 18 cars deep is, those days are few and far between. I mean, Chris, can you speak to that at all? I mean, they're very concerned about the stacking, and we created
Sure.
2 lanes and all that stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, no, and everything that Aaron has just said about being able to identify what lane to be in, we do that with all of our customers, as you said, identifying over the canopy and ahead of time, so that as that customer comes in, they can choose the lane that they're looking for. But when we're doing our performance, we generally say that there's about 280 wash days a year, and only about 20 to 25 of those are considered maximum wash days. Those are the numbers we use when we're doing performance with customers. So those maximum wash days, those are the days where, as Aaron said, they've got an attendant there, he's watching traffic, if someone looks like they're not sure what lane they're supposed to be in, he's there to move that along. He's there to help anybody who might look like they're having a little trouble with the payment terminal, keep the lines moving along smoothly.
how exactly, I mean, if the attendant's not, are you gonna have to use a credit card or cash? Do these machines take credit cards or cash to get your wash?
I believe we're gonna go cashless on this site, so it will only be credit card.
How will they know that in advance when they come in the driveway? I mean, if it's, they may not have a credit card. I mean, what happens then?
If they don't have a credit card?
Well, you said he was gonna be cashless, right?
Yeah,
Or
so, I mean,
or a
there'll be
similar
signage
scenario.
obviously notifying that, and I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's where the industry is going, less and less people are using cash.
No,
So
I understand
That is
that.
the route we're looking at.
But, I understand that, but the thing is that there probably needs to be some sort of,
Signage that.
signage that
Yes.
says, you have a lot of signs.
Yeah.
Signage that says, this is cashless.
Or
Yeah, and that's fine. And-
similar
and
scenario,
honestly,
Aaron.
like, when somebody gets to a bay and they go, oh, I don't have any cash, and there's a car behind them,
Yeah.
that bay door opens, they can drive right through that bay.
Thank you.
So it's not as though they gotta back out and get out of traffic. They can drive right through the bay and just continue on their way.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question. Card declined, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen not even infrequently. So so it sounds like they can just drive through and escape by going
They
forward.
can. Yep. Yep.
Question on the machines, Aaron. I mean, you can have one touchless, one soft touch. Do they make a machine that would do both? So you wouldn't have to choose which lane to go to? I'm sure there's a cost involved.
Chris, you mentioned that.
Yeah, there was a manufacturer out there that attempted that about 20 years ago, and it was a disaster of a piece of equipment, and customers thinking they had chosen one thing, and when they were in the bay and it was washing the car, and they were freaking out because they were sure they pushed the button for touch-free, and it's something that was attempted in the industry and was a failure and has never come back.
Thank you.
Moving on, or we might come back to this, who knows? But with the lighting, with the lights of, cars that are coming into the facility at night with headlights on, and I'm concerned, well, looking away from Dean Street, right? There's a house right there and so
Right.
forth. Do you have any idea in terms of, well, let me back up a little bit. You said that instead of planning, you're gonna have fencing along that particular side, right?
Yes.
So that,
Correct.
The light won't go through that.
Yes.
My question is the angle of the beams lights such that that some of it will go over the fence and so forth?
Most of the site is relatively level, except
Mhm.
for at the entrance.
Mhm.
And the lights, when the vehicle is entering and traversing the 5% grade before it levels out,
Mhm.
the lights are really gonna be aimed right at the building.
Mhm.
And so I think the building is gonna provide an additional shield.
As they come in?
Yes, as they come in.
Okay, and as they snake around then?
As they snake around,
Get
they're
closer
gonna
to the
be-
entrance to the actual
They're gonna
bay?
be basically level, I mean, it's 1%, basically, that apron, if you will, that faces High Street, so those headlights are gonna be basically level.
Yeah, well, maybe not.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I
so-
guess, I mean, there is a standard for, the angle of headlight, both on low beam and high beam. And the question is, will some of that light spill over, really, that fence? So, I mean, I think you're trying to do a good job by putting the full fencing there, but it might be nice to know, come the final, exactly
Right.
how that's gonna work.
Okay.
How tall is the fence, Andrew?
We're proposing a 6-foot-high fence,
And it's on top of a grade, too,
and it's
right?
on top of a grade.
So it's effectively 8
It's
feet,
effectively probably
9 feet.
around 8 feet, yes.
And you,
Around what? 8, is that what you said?
Effectively, yes.
you are seeking the landscaping waiver? I thought I heard you discussing salt, stable plantings?
Well, I can't provide the buffer width that's spelled out in the ordinance.
In the ordinance.
I'm offering plantings because it would soften it, it would go toward meeting the standard, but it won't provide the width required in the standard.
I see.
But that's on the Dean Street side.
That's on the Dean Street
Not the
side.
back side.
Right.
And that was actually gonna be the question, because the landscaping buffer is, what, roughly 15 feet? So is it on the downhill side, the fact that you don't have enough space to put in a landscape buffer?
I thought that it would be better for that abutter also to provide a solid screen because of the headlights versus plantings.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think I mentioned last month, I think it'd be a good idea to check with that neighbor to see, considering the whole width of your lot is the whole width of her lot. And where the standard is plantings, I mean, to check with her to see what would you prefer?
You're talking about
Plantings
here
or-
or here? Or there?
What's the downhill neighbor's name? I
Okay,
can't
okay.
remember.
Ms. Cross.
Cross, yes.
Okay.
And she has been in touch with staff. She hasn't been able to attend a meeting. Carrie forwarded some comments from her earlier.
Yeah,
So, okay.
I think she understands that a fence is proposed.
So the fence is along that side as well?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay. And along those lines, when the folks come out of the bay and they're gonna go back to the Dean Street, what happens to their headlights as they come back out onto that, out of the driveway entrance? What happens to the houses across the street?
there's a retaining wall there.
There aren't any house, it won't be facing any houses. When
Right.
it comes out of the car wash,
When they're
it's gonna turn
exiting.
to Dean Street. And, across the street
It's
is
Denny's.
the old D'Angelo's, I think.
Den-
it was.
Denny's.
Oh, okay,
Denny's.
okay, okay.
Denny's. And
And they get a big retaining wall too, so it won't even shine into that parking lot, it would actually be hitting the
Okay.
retaining wall there that they have.
I will believe you.
it's a tall retaining wall,
Okay, I wasn't familiar, obviously.
yeah.
But then Andrew, on the northern edge of the property, you're proposing a cedar picket fence?
I would like to change that description to the solid panel PVC. I
This
want
is
to
a
do
new
all
one.
solid panel PVC fencing.
Because,
Yeah,
I
on
mean,
the
I
drawing,
mean-
it says
because I
cedar
mean, where you're
picket.
proposing that on SP6, the cedar picket fence, I mean, that abuts,
There's
think
an
35 Elm
existing,
Street.
there's an existing fence there. So we're actually gonna have, way back at the north end of that lot,
right,
that's an existing fence, that's an
Oh.
existing cedar fence.
okay.
So there's, I mean, in effect, we've got like a double break there in that area. But, yeah, there's an existing fence up there. But I just thought it was better to define our project with a fence around the limits of our project rather than leaving a break for whatever was there. And it crisscrosses the property line kind of, and so I'm not sure who owns it.
Okay, on the TRT, there was discussion of curbing, and in 907.2, construction materials paving, I mean, you're proposing curbing on Dean Street to be asphalt.
And that's because it's consistent with what's there. We're gonna match what's there.
But as you come down, High Street is granite.
So,
Correct.
so there's a, yes, up on High Street, it's granite. And so the existing entrance that we're gonna close off up on High Street, there will be granite curb there to match the existing.
But I mean, section C, curbing within the urban core, curbing shall be granite in high-use areas, I don't know if this is considered a high-use area, and concrete in all other places.
I mean, the only place there's granite is basically High Street and Main Street,
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily
a little bit of State Street.
urge you to put in granite, but by the same token, bituminous curbing, I think is useless. It'll last a year or two.
Would you prefer the slip form concrete or,
Yes, I mean, I would.
yeah, I'm okay with that, if Evan, that's, yeah.
I
I'm
mean,
okay with that, it's just, we were just trying to match what's existing.
We were trying to match what was there. Aaron threw out, I mean, give him some credit where credit's due. Aaron had thrown out that right at the beginning. He said, I like the slip form concrete. I said, yes, but trying to match what's there.
Yep. I guess on site distance, on 910.1, do we have to, is there 250 feet site distance from your driveway to High Street?
You can see all the way to High Street. Is there
Yeah, but
that?
is there, do we have to have a 250 foot?
Yeah, but that's an intersection.
No,
I know.
Yeah.
yeah, no.
I mean, technically, would they need a waiver for that?
Frankly, I've never seen it done before. Because I can't tell you what project or projects that we've done where we've had a similar situation, but it wasn't waived by the planning board.
I mean, Lena doesn't have to come up with an answer now, but
Yeah, so you're saying 250 based on this being 25 mile per hour street?
Yes.
Yeah, it's certainly not that. You probably,
I mean,
I don't know that you
there
even.
could be a little question, because it says site distance 10 feet for each mile per hour posted speed limit.
Yep.
Dean Street isn't necessarily a posted speed limit. It would have an absolute speed limit of 25 because of how close the houses are, according to motor vehicle law.
Oh,
It's not technically posted unless they put a 25 mile an hour sign there.
But the site distance has to do with a driveway or whatever coming out into a street where there's really, cars and so forth going really back and forth, okay? And what you're looking at here is looking only to the High Street intersection. And it is what it is.
are you saying because people are coming from a
Stop.
low speed?
Yeah, right. I
As
mean,
they turn onto?
Obviously someone can make that left turn, off of High Street and just be roaring. I mean, that's always the case.
Sure.
But, it's not gonna be, generally speaking, a continuous flow in the same sense that, Dean onto High Street might be.
Well, granted, that's a good point, but the following section talks about new access ways in the functional area of an intersection, so what's
Geez,
the
there's so many
functional?
things in this.
Because I can think of other examples around town where there are driveways too close to.
Well, the question
functional-
becomes, how close can a driveway be to the intersection?
Right.
And there should be some standard for that. I don't know honestly whether it's in there or not.
I don't
I don't know, I know that, when we did the entrance to Dairy Queen, if you will, the Dairy Queen site, that we were required by DOT to, we provided about 100-foot separation between the McDonald's entrance and exit, and that entrance road that we provided that goes in and ties into the mall and Dairy Queen. Is because the center line of that is 80 feet from the property line.
How far is it from the driveway to High Street?
About 120 feet. And just looking at the dimensions on the plan,
Are we closer or further than what was existing before?
well, we're further than the one entrance. We're further
So
than
there was
the,
so there was already an existing entrance that was closer to High Street than
yes.
we
For
are now.
subway or
For
for
Subway.
residential?
No, it was for Subway.
Yeah, the entrance for Subway
Was like
is
40 to
closer to
50
High
feet.
Street
Yeah.
than
Then this guy.
this car wash
Yeah,
entrance.
about 50 feet.
I'm curious,
I
John,
mean-
about this turning radius. Do you think you could do this in your truck? There's a car here. Because I'm feeling like I couldn't do it in mine.
No.
Yeah, just looking at that outside lane for traffic traveling southbound on Dean Street. If you've got a full-size pickup with a long bed, that's gonna be pretty tight in the event there was somebody in the outside, or somebody, sorry, in the inside lane, and you're trying to turn between them and the curb. It's pretty tight.
What we used is we used a variety, as you can see, of vehicle sizes.
Yeah.
16, 18s, and 20s, and we used their turning radiuses published like from Chevrolet
Okay.
to lay that out. And I'm not gonna argue with you, I mean, if you had a crew cab long bed, yeah, you would be doing it. For the majority of vehicles, I think it works.
If the inside radius for that truck that's pulling in off of Dean and turning, comes onto the site and turns right, if that radius right there is the same as a radius on a regular corner, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me that that's adequate. Notwithstanding that it might, oh, geez, I can't finish my turn.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any geometry here.
But there's
that's gonna make it
also,
any better,
I mean,
but-
turning templates that he can just lay right on that and tell you, right? Tell us all.
And I guess that's what I'm getting at. It either meets the standard or it doesn't. Whether I can get my truck in there is a different question.
And kind of along the same lines, that area there, if this project was approved, I would certainly encourage the city to put up no parking signs there. And that's something that,
There
well,
is-
that smaller distance the chief could do, that one would not necessarily have to go to the council.
I believe there is one,
No parking to
Yeah.
corner,
yeah.
Okay.
but it's
yeah.
pretty close to
It's
the
close
corner.
to the corner. It's
It's on the
probably,
plan.
I mean, I would suggest no parking signs on both sides of the road.
no, oh, I don't
The
disagree with
whole,
you.
the whole width of the property, the whole length of the property.
But if you could find the turning template for whatever size pickup truck and
Right. and
lay it
that's
on
what-
there
And that's what I used,
and make-
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's what you
Yeah,
did?
that's what I
Okay.
used, is, yeah, yeah. I went and I got a couple of my typical turning templates, and then I looked at the inside and the outside radius for, some different vehicles from, I think I used Chevrolet, but yes, and checked it against them,
Okay. I mean, that's okay with me.
yeah.
Andrew, on SP six, if I remember correctly, the vacuum is gonna be on the downhill side?
Yes.
Because it doesn't, on the SP six, it doesn't have any location for the vacuum.
The vacuums are gonna be on the, near the edge of the pavement on that downhill side, yes.
How many,
Three,
three?
yeah, 3 max.
What about all the, moving off of traffic for a minute, which is okay with me. What about all the concern that we had relative to, you know, drippings off the vehicle and chemicals and all that
Yeah,
stuff?
and
Can you speak to that?
I'll address it just a little bit, and then I think, Chris can address it maybe better than I can, but, I looked at an EPA document specifically regarding car washes. And their primary concern was the concentrated wash water in the bays being quote-unquote treated, whether it's going to a wastewater treatment plant or, I guess, I mean, that's your only option, other than going into a holding tank and being, or going to a wastewater treatment plant. And I could give you a couple examples, but what they were not concerned with, and I used the right term, or the term that they used. Let's call it drippage. They were not concerned about the drippage of the water that was coming off a vehicle after it exited the site, especially in today's, because of concentrated with the dirt, the primary dirt, the concentrated wastewater, if you will, is in the bay, going to the sewer treatment plant. Water that's dripping off, there was not a concern about. What some states are requiring now is that even people that do like this mobile detailing and things like that, there are special pads that can be laid down, and people can wash the cars on this pad, then they can roll up the pad when they're done and carry it off, so that that concentrated dirty water is not going off-site, which it's not here. So the only thing we have is clean water and some drippage. But I'll let Chris talk about that a little bit more.
I guess I'm missing the point of the question, if that's what could be clarified, I guess.
So, what their concern is, Chris, is how much chemical leaves the bay once the car is washed? Like the, you know, the water that's dripping off the vehicle, how much chemical is in there? And like I guess the toxicity of the chemical, I guess, is that the question? I mean, we're not doing anything different than the other 2 car washes in town. And all the chemicals we use are Simonized that are, you know, all up to EPA standards and all that stuff. And I actually sent you a letter from Simonized, right, Andrew? I don't know if you-
I have that, I did not forward it, but I do have that, yes.
Okay, all right,
So to go back to that first part of your question, Aaron, after the first part of the process is to clean the dirt off of the vehicle, you're looking at a 5-minute wash, I'm gonna say by the 2.5-minute point, the vehicle is cleaned at that point. The dirt has been broken loose, washed off, and is down in the collection pit. The remaining cycles are rinsing cycles and waxing cycles, and then a final, what we call spot-free rinse, or a final rinse of water that's had the minerals removed from it, and then the dryer. So you have very little drip coming out the exit door, but what is in that is basically just water. Because with all of the waxing rinses after the cleaning, there's hardly any solution left on the vehicle whatsoever, at all, really. Because if there is, that's just gonna turn into streaks and stains on the vehicle, and then we're not giving a quality wash. So the wash is designed so that whatever's left on the vehicle when it leaves is just water. That's the last thing we want on the vehicle. We don't want any chemicals to be on it as it leaves.
And the water that comes off during the wash cycle, and is captured right there. What happens to that water? Is that just right into the sewer line, or
Yes.
what?
Yes,
Well,
that goes right into
it's- It's collected in the pit, it's in the,
Right.
in the bay. The solids settle in the pit. The water would flow to, Aaron, is there an oil water separator in the plan? Or is it straight out to the sewer?
I don't know, I can't
Okay,
say.
might be straight out to the sewer, so some do, some don't. But what's flowing out to the sewer has already had all of the solids, the dirts, we call them solids, those have already settled out into the pit, and then the pits are cleaned regularly by Aaron and his crew. So the water that's running out is really no different than anything that's washing off the car during driving through a rainstorm, because the solids have already settled out.
But you have some detergent, or whatever, that
Right.
has, gone off the car and is into the pit or whatever. And that goes, from there, it goes straight to the sewer,
Yeah.
and it's not treated then, right? It goes straight to the river?
No.
it's
no.
treated at the sewer
Sewer
treatment
treatment.
plant.
So that is a combined
Yes.
sewer, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It
Well-
doesn't go into the storm drain.
Okay.
Goes-
Yeah, it's
Okay, all right,
treated,
okay,
yeah.
okay. I mean, that was kind of what I was
Yep.
asking, okay.
Two separate, there's stormwater treatment and there's wastewater
Right,
service. Yes.
Aaron, I think you may have answered this last week, but at the end of the cleaning, when the blow dryer comes on, the garage doors are still closed during that? Because presumably that's,
They can be, it's a setting, so we can leave the doors closed the whole time, we can open them, it's really preference.
preference for who? Preference for the neighbors would be to have the garage doors closed because vacuum is, the blow dryer vacuum, whatever you want to call it, is probably one of the louder portions of the car wash.
Yeah, we can obviously set that up if that's the preferred method. Like I said, they're all automated, so it's, we can have it open, we can have it closed while it's drying, and then once it's ready to go, we can open the door and let them out, so.
Yeah, you can even set those to have the doors where during the nicer warmer weather, the doors are open and will close during the wash process if that's necessary, and then reopen to let the vehicle out, and if it's a nice enough day, it just stays open to be attractive.
If the doors are biased closed during all seasons, does that affect your 10 vehicles per hour, or is it still 10, or does it drop to 9 because it's slightly less efficient?
No, it doesn't change your washability to wash cars. If they're closed all year round, you're gonna be creating a greenhouse effect for Aaron. He's gonna have to be cleaning a lot of green mold off of his walls in the summertime when it gets too warm in there. But it doesn't affect that, but ideally you want that to be able to be open, attractive to customers during anything over 50 degrees, really. It doesn't necessarily need to be.
I guess I should clarify, so the doors are biased closed whenever the machinery is running and making noise?
Oh, we can do
You-
that.
You can set them to do that, that is correct, yes. You can set them so that they will close during the process and keep the noise down if that need be, and then open up. And if it's still cold, they'll close behind the vehicle, and if it's warm enough, they'll stay open to air out the traffic.
Is that something we can make as a condition of approval, not necessarily tonight, but down the line? That they operate that way?
Definitely.
I'm sorry?
Definitely you can.
Definitely we can. We have so much problem.
Any other questions from the board?
Just, Elaine, are there any concerns, considering we're at completeness review, looking through your reports?
I'm not really concerned.
Yeah, it looks like they satisfied what we raised last meeting as far as additional materials.
Yeah, there's some things still to, have at least been acknowledged in, letters about here's what we're going to do, and I think it's nothing that's, obstructing your review right now.
And just one last question on the queuing, okay? You really could do a little bit of work on, what's the likely queue lengths, given that you have 2 service stations there and they take 5 minutes or whatever, and you have cars that are gonna be arriving, uniformly over the hour or whatever. You could do some quick calculations as to what the actual queue lengths might be. And that would, allay some of those fears that you're gonna have all this, queuing out, that spills out into the street and has to be controlled or whatever. So.
And to that point, just like Chris said, that, we're talking about 20 days.
Oh, no, I understand. I'm just saying, if you clean it up, it makes the package more complete.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I'll actually add a little bit to that. So I did hear that the 25 days peak period. I'll just offer that Ellsworth and High Street in particular have an atypically busy traffic pattern during the tourist season. And I don't know, if the 25 days was sort of based on not accounting for that atypically high traffic pattern for the region, then I would wonder if it's really a higher number up here.
Yeah, that's more of an industry average thing. It is not specific whatsoever to a region or a town or anything like that.
But if you
Rough
do.
numbers to use.
Sorry. If you do some sort of quick analysis of the queuing for a worst-case scenario, and it's okay, it doesn't matter how many times it occurs, right? It's just like it occurs, it's gonna be busier, but it doesn't really spill
Right,
out.
my question was more based on, I interpreted that as those were the days when you were going to have somebody on site manning the facility.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I'm
okay.
suggesting, that
Okay.
during peak tourist season,
You may have.
25 days may not be enough
May not be
days.
enough. Okay.
Yeah, no, it wasn't, we weren't specific on the, and that's a hard one too, because weather dictates it, all that stuff. So, I mean, it's gonna be kind of a trial and error type thing. And we're gonna have somebody there every day, guaranteed. It's just a matter of how long do they stay? Is it a real busy day? Do they hang out all day, or you know what I'm saying? So we have to be there I say we have to be, but I make it a requirement that we're there. I'm at my site every day, making sure that there's no trash cans that are full, making sure the chemicals are full, making sure the bays are picked up, they're swept, all that stuff. So that's standard practice for me. So it's basically We show up at the site, if it's a crazy busy day, really nice, a lot of people there, we're gonna hang out and make sure the traffic flows. If it's not, then yeah, we might go home. You know what I mean? So that's.
And those guys are on call anyway, is that correct? In other
Right,
words, if
yeah.
they were there in the morning and everything was hunky-dory, and then it kind of went south at 1 o'clock, they could be
Yeah.
called back, is that correct?
Yeah, and we can track that too. We can see how much we're doing during the day remotely, so we can say, oh, hey, you know, we're busy, we've got cameras, we've got all that stuff, so we can tell when we need somebody there or not, you know.
Okay.
Aaron, I guess reading the article in the Ellsworth American, I mean, you live in North Berwick, is that correct?
I do, correct, yeah.
I mean, how would and you have a car wash in North Berwick, correct?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How would that compare to this one here? I mean, as far,
In what regard?
does it have 2 bays, or, what I'm getting at is, you know,
It
can you
is
compare the?
exactly, it is set up exactly the same. I have 2 bays, I have 1 soft touch, I have 1 touch free. It's automated, couple vacuums, same exact thing as we're proposing up there.
I mean, I think one of the big concerns is how many hours per day you have someone on site. If perhaps you could provide some manpower hours that somebody is on site on the North Warwick to kind of compare it to, you know, it's a similar operation. Maybe if you have, you know, somebody on site in North Warwick 50 hours a week, you know, you might have someone on site here 50 hours a week, or, you know, I guess if you could give us a little better idea of.
More to the point, if you could collect some data at North Berwick or wherever, to actually say, gee, these are the cues that we observed over, you know, a couple of weeks or whatever. And that would, I think, go a long way towards allaying everyone's fears without having to do any, you know, I use the word sophisticated, you know, guardedly, but any sophisticated analysis, right? So if you have a very, very similar site, in terms of the operations and so forth, and the traffic and all that, and especially the number of bays, or whatever, tunnels.
I mean, a lot of that would depend on what their traffic count is.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. But I can't imagine putting a car wash on a back street somewhere, right? It just doesn't strike me as the way you do that, but maybe. So anyway, but if you could do a little bit of that, I think that would be a really healthy thing. You know, because with the guy that was just in here for the Beaumark, okay? One of the things that they did was they went out to the Bangor Road site and said, here's what we observed. And what they observed right there was a lot lower numbers than had been suggested by the ITE trip generation manual. So, you know, now obviously that can come back around too. It's like, oh, wow.
So just as long as you don't plan on putting a Dunkin' Donuts there. you're all set.
Yeah, the Dunkin' Donuts will definitely go onto the street.
Any other questions?
Public hearing.
I know.
Okay.
I will
I was just being,
have
I was just
public
being
hearing.
vicey. I was being vicey, right?
Yeah. And anybody who does want to come up, please come up to the podium, identify yourself, by name, and what town you live in, or if you have a business here in town. And just to remind you that this is still a preliminary hearing. We had a preliminary hearing last month. We're still doing a preliminary hearing, so no final decisions will be made tonight.
Good evening. I'm Kim Gorley. I live at 35 Elm with my husband, Bob Minette. I missed last month, sorry, I was at work, so I wanted to attend this month's meeting. And I have to say, I listened carefully, looked at the plans tonight, and kudos to Aaron for you guys. Really, I like the landscaping and the consideration to the residents, but I have a couple concerns. We abut you on the north end, so at 35, Elm, and I love this fence idea. The 5% grade is a little bit concerning coming in at that entrance, frankly, because you're right, the light does shoot up, and we have problems with Freshies and RH Foster that we have done a lot of work with them, so we're already familiar with being abutted next to a business that has a lot of volume and is open 24 hours, and that's why we're so verbal here today. super concerned about not necessarily the business noise and the business light, but the customer noise and the customer light, which I know Brad said you guys talked about briefly last time, but you cannot control Mr. Jones, who wants to play Def Leppard at 9:59 PM while he's vacuuming his car on a Saturday night. And so that is one of the things that Brad and I have discussed at length, the 10 PM. That's a big concern for us because most of the restaurants in Ellsworth close at 9 PM. So we're wondering about that, and we're really happy to hear that 10 to 6 is up to consideration, but we really would like, honestly, that to be backed up a little bit. We had a couple questions about this north fence. You said that there was an existing fence there, but there's only an existing fence on the rear part of the property, where you see that little zigzag there? That's
Correct.
actually our fence.
Okay.
The, what are the tainters? They're not, as verbal as they should be, I don't think, and they're not really advocating for themselves, but there's there's a little slight retaining wall here, but there's no fence here, so they're gonna have a lot of light pollution and a lot of noise pollution. Go ahead. And you can ask
Okay.
me anything you like, but,
We're proposing a fence there, though.
okay, perfect.
Yes.
Perfect.
And you are correct. I mean, I did not think that Aaron, if you will, was the owner of that picket fence. I wasn't sure who was.
No, it's okay. I just want.
But we're providing us, this solid fence closer to the edge of the pavement so that we are endeavoring to try to provide that as a screen. And even though there is somewhat of a fence there now, and then that area that's essentially L-shaped, if you will, to the main lot is going to remain vegetated.
Great. It's kind of a wasteland
make,
back there
to
now.
make
So.
the landscape, it's a combination, yes. I mean, it's a combination of vegetation. I mean, there's trees, there's shrubs, there's a little bit of grass. The neighbor parks a couple of their cars there.
Right.
But it is vegetated to an extent, and so we plan to leave that, so that we're not coming further toward the abutters.
Okay. I mean, ultimately, if I had my dream there behind that PVC panel, you would consider some evergreen plantings, because it will help with further light pollution. Because it will still, and it does kind of help with noise a little bit. We talked at length with R.H. Foster when they were doing their renovations, and if you look on Elm, you can see a lot of evergreens on that side for the same reason. But although nobody will see it, it might just help us a little bit in terms of noise. So the vacuums, that's a big concern, like that's my biggest concern, because it's super, again, it's not just the noise of the vacuum, but the noise of the people using the vacuums, and the noise of the people waiting for it's summertime at 9 PM, waiting to get into the car wash with their windows open and their music blaring. And unfortunately, we live this every summer with Freshies and R.H. Foster. We struggle with their 24-hour operation. We call the police. I call the police a lot, and I hate to be one of those neighbors, but it's one of the things that we'd like to see is, and I believe I'm seeing it in every effort, but I really need to say it, is that a blended residential, commercial, they have to be married together and they have to meet our needs as residents. We love Ellsworth. We have 2 properties here. We're we bought an old house on the Shore Road. We're fixing that up. We're well known to code enforcement. So
In a good way or a bad way?
Good way, we're good people.
That's what they think.
Yeah, we bought Elm many years ago. We fixed it up. But I guess and I'm sorry to be repetitive, but it's important to us that we be considered as residents along with the commercial part of it. We have to be good neighbors to each other. I think it's looking like these guys are really interested in that, but we're super concerned about the noise you know, after 8 or 9 p.m. I'm a nurse, so sometimes I work night shift and sometimes I work day shift, and I don't want to be woken up with Def Leppard at 10 p.m. if I've worked my buns off all day. So I had just a couple other things. The turning left and the zoo on High Street, yes. I think that if that happened, and again, it doesn't sound like that's in this wheelhouse, but what will just happen is they'll go down Dean, they'll turn on Hancock, they'll turn up Elm, and then try to turn left up there. And I assure you, I haven't turned left on Elm Street in 10 years. It's too much. It's just the way we manage that High Street situation with the 4 lanes has made it really difficult for residents of those areas, which I would consider that area to be kind of historic, given the, you know, age of some of those homes. So looking at that, and I understand you don't want left on Elm, Dean, and Pine, but we kind of would like a really strictly enforced speed limit on High Street, which I think would dramatically help some of the problems that we're seeing the zoo of High. Again, outside this wheelhouse, but maybe for future planning, you guys could consider that. I think that's all I have. And so in the last meeting, you talk about decibel levels of cars at rest with music, you know, what the implication of that would be?
We looked at the decibel levels of the machinery itself.
Mhm.
I don't think we actually considered the decibel levels of the automobiles. Correct
Right.
me if I'm wrong.
No, I believe that the equipment is gonna generate a much higher decibel level than a vehicle at rest, but I mean, I can look at that before final and give you some numbers on what vehicles at rest.
I think you're probably right, a vehicle at rest. I think the concern here is the
Music.
boombox stereo, which
Yeah.
is not really a vehicle at rest.
And I think that, you know, we don't want the progress to be halted, we just don't want to hear it at 10 p.m. at night. You know, we picked where we live, we understand it's next to High Street, but it's one of those things where it's one of those things where we just feel that we don't want to become a nuisance to Aaron and the business, we don't want to be calling the police. If we fix it or think about it now, perhaps we can avert not being very good neighbors.
The reason we picked those hours is because that's the town's ordinance hours.
Okay,
That's how they have it after 10 a.m., 10
Okay.
p.m. and before 6 a.m.
okay.
Obviously, if that's a, big bone of contention, if we dropped it to like 9 p.m. at night or something like that, and we could even shut the vacuums off at, 7 if you wanted
Right,
to, you know what I mean,
actually.
something like that.
Yeah.
Because obviously, if we close the doors, the wash would contain itself pretty good as far
Right.
as noise level. The vacuums
Right.
are out in the open, we understand that. So close the vacuums off a little earlier,
Yeah.
and then, keep the wash open till 9 instead of 10, something like that.
That would actually be incredible, because we are really more concerned about the vacuums and people, you know what people do.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and you don't really want somebody out there at 9 o'clock at night, but I get it,
Yeah,
yeah, I understand
perfect.
that. Yep.
Thank you.
The other point that we raised that is pretty easy is that you were talking about the noise of people in their cars waiting in line, but usually at those times of the day, you don't have a lot of lines of people. People are straggling in 1, 2, 3, paying, washing, leaving, and you don't have the long lines of vehicles where the car 3 cars back has got their windows open and blaring music. You just don't usually get those lines at that time of the day.
I mean, I would have to say, Mr. Wiswell, I mean, if you wanted to cut your hours back to 9, I mean, I would certainly look extremely favorable on that. I think-
No, I'm okay with that, we'll close the wash down at 9 o'clock, and then, like I said, we can close the vacuums down a little bit earlier, if that's, you know what I mean, if that makes sense, I'm okay with that, good.
Yeah, because that is within our purview as the board to, deal with the hours of operation as a, so. Just saying.
Thank you. Anybody else?
My name's Albert Hammond. I have Hammond's Car Wash, Hammond Tire on High Street. I'm going to ask Aaron, what model of equipment is going into this building? What make and model?
Right now, we're thinking about wash world.
Okay. Now, there's wash worlds, you're gonna close the doors while you're washing, and then especially when the blowers come on. Are the blowers mounted on the machine, or are they mounted on the exit?
They're mounted on the machine.
Okay. Then, you said you're buying your product from Simonize.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing now. Yeah.
That's what we use also.
Yeah.
The truck that they come with to my shop, the trailer is 53 feet long and the cab is 25. How are you gonna get that into your yard and turn it around and get it out?
He can't park on the side of the street and unload his chemicals.
You answer that, I'm not answering it.
I think that would be highly unlikely.
Yeah, okay, well then he backs into the site. I mean, there's, or we tell him he can't come in a big tractor trailer truck like that, and he comes in a small box truck. There's plenty of, there's plenty of, wiggle room there.
All right, now you asked them a question about, isn't there one machine that does both? Soft touch and touch free. There is. There's two large companies. One is called Autech and one is called Mark 7. Thus, I've had Autech before, and we just installed Mark 7s. They do both touch free and soft touch. And they work very efficiently in my building. So we run them both all day long. I think most of you already know, you've been around how my days go and how busy we are. Now, one of the car counts that he said, and Chris said that peak days. You guys already know that I have a heck of a lot. I have run about, I just did the math, about 150 peak days a year, where we're doing almost max from 10 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock. The fringes in the beginning and the fringes at the end, and we usually shut down the automatic wash at 7 o'clock. We leave the self-service open in the evening, and the nights the lights go off at 9 o'clock at night. Now, you also accounted for drippage. I've been watching.
You have automated machines, or do you have
Aaron,
manned machines?
Aaron, let's not get into that discussion. That's,
Oh, okay, I'm just, he's pointing out a lot of facts for his watch. I'm just curious
Yep.
what his operation is.
you could give him a call tomorrow.
All right, now, on the drippage, my washers, I average 36 gallons between the two of them. One is 33, one is about 40. The amount of me driving out of my car wash, when you come from stop and you're leaving, there is 24 feet before you exit the building and exit the blowers. Now, then from that pad's another 25 feet. I can measure water and you can see water all the way till you start up that big slope we put in so that all the water will come back on our property. There is drippage. No matter how good you try it, there is drippage. And so I'm just stating it. You can come look at my wash, you can come do it. And my last thing I want to say, that I agree with Aaron and also Chris. At the very end, when we're washing and drying the car, what we're doing, all the rinsing with just fresh water. And the fresh water, by the time the car gets out, there is no of our wash products on the car. It's all in the base, except on some pickup trucks. You did mention, Aaron, that I forgot till just now, that you could turn off the water going in the back of pickup trucks that does not have a bed on it. Is that true?
Chris, will you speak to that?
I'm sorry, yes. Yes, you can shut off the rinse on the vehicles that don't, chemicals to triple foams and other products. So the machine can sense an open bed and turn off those functions if programmed that way.
Okay, how do you wash the high sides?
Well, let's,
No, I'm sorry, I won't go there.
okay, thank you.
Okay, then, I guess, pretty much, besides the blower noise is very serious. That's the noisiest part of my car wash. And if their blower noise is contained in the building, that will help the neighbors. But the doors, they gotta be closed, because those blowers make so much noise. I have no other questions.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Jason Barrett. I spoke last time. I'm in a butter at 33 Elm Street, and I'm grateful for the opportunity, grateful for the work you guys do. You toil in obscurity until somebody tries to put in a car wash next to their house, and then you hear from us. So I understand it's kind of thankless, in the trenches kind of job. I expressed concerns last time, and I guess I just would reiterate those. Generally, I am appreciative that it does hear that there's some willingness to kind of accommodate some of the concerns, and so thank you. Sound continues to be a pretty big concern. I'm interested in the calculation that was done. In some of the materials, it suggested that the sound of the vacuums was between 60 decibels and 70 decibels. Well, that doesn't sound like a big difference to the uninitiated. The difference between 60 decibels and 70 decibels is 10 times the sound volume. The difference between 60 decibels and 80 decibels is 100 times different in sound. The increase of 10 decibels to the human ear is a doubling of sound intensity. Sounds like a lot of gobbledygook. The point is that just that 10 decibels difference is significant. So I'm curious about that, because when I did the research in terms of what the sound of vacuums is, I found consistently 70 to 75 decibels for vacuums, that was the sound level. That's a concern. The time of day when that sound would be heard, with a lot of frequency, that's an issue. And certainly later in the day and into the evening, that starts to become more and more of a concern. So I've heard that there's maybe a willingness to adjust the hours and when those vacuums are on or off. We'll be very appreciative that the sooner that can cut off. So I heard 7. I don't know if that's going to be incorporated, 7 p.m. on the turning off the vacuums. But again, sound is one of the predominant concerns. I'll also say that light is another concern, and light pollution. There are lots of maps and survey work, and I think Andrew's done a great job. But I wouldn't, on any of the plans that show the elevation, I think that's something of particular interest. To just be mindful that this site sits kind of at the top of the hill, and the residential kind of neighborhood is kind of lower down the hill. So the kind of the asphalt, if you will, elevation here on this side is proposed at 101 feet above sea level. Where the fence is proposed is about 96, 97 feet. So that's a difference of 4 to 5 feet. So if you're 101 at where the hot top is and a headlight or an outdoor vacuum, that's going to be at least another 2 feet off that. My point being that the sound and the light is going to just zip right over the fence. And if you look at where that bay comes out and the people have their headlights on at night, that's pointed gratefully not pointed at our property, but Ms. Cross's property, every car that comes out of there, its headlights are gonna hit that house. And I don't know a good way around that, other than mitigating through hours of operation.
We can go to color fence, if we need to shield, I mean, that's why we recommended the fence, was because the ordinance looks for a landscape buffer to shade lights, and we didn't see that as sufficient, so that's why we were going with the fence. So if we have to go with a taller fence to make sure that nothing gets into the residence area, yeah, I think we should definitely do that.
And I appreciate that. I mean, the kind of willingness to make accommodations to address these concerns is genuinely appreciated. The one thing we want to see just as neighbors is that those things become concrete, and they're fixed. So I know that the neighbor that Ms. Gorley spoke about, they put in an 8-foot high solid vinyl fence. Greatly appreciated. There's a huge difference between a 6-foot vinyl fence and an 8-foot vinyl fence, especially where there's traffic. It's not a problem to throw your fast food stack over a 6-foot fence. An 8-foot fence, that's not the same thing, but that would help, I think, with sound. I will also say that the ordinance does talk about, a buffer that is sufficient to manage kind of light and sound. I don't think a fence alone is going to do that, particularly light and sound is going to go over the fence, but a combination, and selfishly, I mean, particularly back towards the west and north end, where you do have an open spot, putting a vegetative buffer of evergreens in addition to the fence, I think would go a long way to prevent, creating a light and sound screen. So I would, encourage that. I had a question just about the trips, because it sounded like the 40 trips analysis was based on how many that the site could service, but that doesn't capture just the general public saying, hey, I want a car wash, and coming down there and turning it, and once they're turned down, they find out, oh, I can't get in there, I can't, it's full. I mean, there's still a trip. And so it was unclear if there's going to be a traffic study done or not. That seemed to be maybe an open question as I was listening to the dialogue. But I would think that this is going to have significant impacts on traffic, not only on High Street, and I mentioned this last time, but on Water Street. And if you're local, you don't drive on High Street in the summertime. You're not one of the 4 million people who are headed to Acadia, and you just know to avoid that, you go around by Water Street. Well, that's not as big a secret as it used to be, and Water Street is backed up way past the shellfish place in evenings trying to get through that light. And if you're coming towards Main Street, past the Harbor Park, you're coming up over that hill, and that Dean Street, Water Street intersection is incredibly sharp. It's right at the hill, 2 utility poles right in the corner, and it's a tight turn. That will create problems. And it's not a turn that you can kind of roll and come in with any amount of speed. It's almost a turn that particularly if there's a car at that stop sign trying to get onto Water off of Dean, you have to almost come to a stop in order to make that tight turn. The guy coming over the hill behind you, he's not anticipating that there's going to be 1 or 2 cars that are stopped there. So I think that a traffic study is important, both for High Street impacts and for that Water Street Dean intersection impact. And then if you're cutting off the left turn, where's that forcing that additional traffic? In some ways, as I consider the level of service standards, I don't know what this area is rated for currently, if it's an A level of service or a B. I mean, if you're counting Dean Street, I mean, right now, Dean Street, nobody's interfering with you. I mean, you can get up and down that street without impact, so maybe it's a level A. If there's any congestion, particularly if there's backup, you're moving to a level D automatically. And I would just suggest under the standards, you're only allowed 1 level, and certainly nothing D or worse. So again, we're in a situation where a traffic study, I think, would go a long way under the standards. Don't want to be too technical, but, you know, the standards provide us some guidance. There's been some talk about traffic on and off the site. I've looked at the plan in terms of the stacking and the flow. And even on paper, that's sure a tight turn on that one car, and we understand that that might be a, you know, a max capacity kind of a situation. That looks pretty tight. I don't know what the distance is between the rear bumper of the one car and the other one, but that's some coordinated driving. And I don't see a place on this plan if you're in either line and you say, I don't want to be here, I don't have my money, whatever. I don't know how you're going to get out of that. And so, I mean, there are just some practical concerns with that. It also seems inconsistent with the ordinance. You look at the ordinance and it talks about access, traffic impacts. It says that provisions should be made for vehicular access, and so that there's to safeguard against hazards and to avoid traffic congestion on any access ways, and to provide a safe and convenient circulation on and off site. None of this has really been, the conversation's been tailored around kind of safe and convenient circulation of traffic. It's, if everything goes right, and on paper, if you can control all those pieces, it could work. And I understand that maybe that's, under max usage. However, we've heard from somebody who's run a car wash here in this area for decades, and he's talking about 150 days max usage. I will also submit, I have looked at the other location, and they are not in a traffic flow situation where they have 1 million cars piping through High Street, and nowhere near that kind of volume or flow. So I don't know, I think some of the comparative analysis is helpful, and I think that experience is helpful. And I appreciate, I'm not hearing a tone deafness from you, and that's genuinely appreciated. The concern that we have is that we have a family here. That site has been lightly used for a long time, and it's a quiet place. What's being proposed, or initially what was proposed, seemed to have a significant change on that impact. So I recognize that this is an opportunity just for completeness, but it's also an opportunity to kind of hear some of the concerns that are out there. These concerns won't go away unless, and until we hear specifics that are commitments that are incorporated either as conditions or that are binding from you. So, I mean, this is, that's what you're supposed to do, is you fight for home and castle. It's a place where we've raised our children. We still have young children, and we want that to continue to be what's special. There are lots of places in town where this kind of project would be absolutely perfect, absolutely made it. But this is a residential neighborhood. It has had that character. Even though there's been some commercial use, the commercial use there wasn't this kind of use. So I appreciate you hearing the concerns. I appreciate you listening and your volunteering. I hope that dialogue continues. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess, Elena, maybe to answer Mr. Barrett's question, I mean, is a traffic study in Andrew's future?
I think so. That's my read of Article 9.
Okay.
If we're going to, or if the planning board is going to require a traffic study, we need to define what or where specifically you want. Do you want High Street, Dean Street intersection analyzed? Do you want the Water Street, Dean Street intersection analyzed? Are you concerned?
I would say.
I think the top and bottom end of the
I mean,
street.
a traffic study always does the appropriate downstream and upstream intersections, so. I mean, the Water Street intersection actually is a little far away, but it's key. And how does the driveway itself operate in essence as an intersection? So I think that, I mean, I would suggest that we could probably come up with questions that we want to ask of the traffic analysis, or want to be addressed by the traffic analysis. I don't know that we have to do that right here and now.
No, any other details that you work out with Elena? But yeah,
Exactly.
I think the board would want to see Bean Street, top and bottom.
So one point to quickly address, I know the hearing's still open, but another, Mr. Barrett's comments. So, Andrew, I think very early on, you said in the redesign, there is an escape lane on the outside, at
There
least for the
is.
cars that are on the outside
Yes.
lane.
Yeah.
Clearly, that
They
may
have
not
to-
practically work for the inside lane, but for the outside lane, there's an escape lane.
Right.
I mean,
Go on the
they-
back of the building.
They have to get there, but yes, it goes around the back of the building.
Is there anybody else that wanted to speak? Okay, I will close the public hearing. Any other questions from the board? Either the applicant or staff? You haven't asked fire guy anything?
What's that?
I said you haven't asked fire guy anything.
Oh, no, but I read his thing, right? And last time I asked where you could fight the fire from or whatever, and he said, well, we don't do it from there, we do
full
it
of
from the
water."
street. So I'm not asking him any more questions, period.
You don't love me no more?
The fire guy okay with this?
Well, in that case, then, on your letter though, you include, submitted site plans for the proposed self-storage units, Beaumark.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'll change
But for the
it.
most part,
Okay,
you talk
fire guy.
about those, see, I didn't want to get away with nothing.
Thanks a lot. Here I am trusting you
Yeah,
and
yeah.
getting fit.
Any other questions, Molly?
I don't think so.
I'm good.
Do we have a motion?
Sure. I make a motion that we accept as complete the preliminary plan for major use site development entitled A and B LLC for Aaron Wiswell.
Is there a second?
Or not.
There's no conditions we're
Oh,
putting
just,
on.
this.
Just
but-
complete, yep.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
I say.
Okay. All in favor of approving the preliminary plans, it's complete. Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Mr. Wiswell.
Thank you.
That being said, there's still a fair number of things to do between now and then.
I'm going to turn it over to Elena.
Yes.
You guys don't have to stick around.
Thank you, guys.
Feel free to bail. Thank you, Albert.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
You're on the clock here, Elena.
yes, what time is it? 7:28? Do you think I can do it in 2 minutes? That'd be nice and round.
God could only hope.
So just a few things to look forward to. Most likely at the next council meeting is March 21st. Planning to recognize John Fink's 30 years of service there and 22 years as chair. Round numbers, it's a little longer than that, but, so that should be on the agenda and you're all welcome to attend. A couple other things that'll happen at that meeting that are on the draft agenda at the moment, to extend the solar moratorium for a bit. That's moved a bit slower than expected, so at the same time, it doesn't expire until mid-April, but the timing of the meetings and the expiration is such that we really should have the council take action in March, and that would give us a little more time. As I mentioned last month, I've been in touch with a consultant that I think will give us a great little workshop to answer some of the questions that have been raised here and at the council. So keep an eye out for dates for a workshop, potentially, if it works for people, maybe before the April meeting, I don't know, but we can discuss later. But the council taking that action, just to give us a little more time, is on that agenda. And then if you watched the February council meeting, I gave a presentation on the comp plan process with a focus on public participation and timeline. So I'm going back to them in March with a request to designate the planning board as the planning committee. That's how the state statute phrases it, for the responsibility of updating, preparing the comprehensive plan. So that would mean that then we can start with all the necessary steps and once that's done. So, John, you look like you have questions. Or is that just?
No, I've got
You're
something to say,
listening
but.
face?
This will consume your entire life going forward. Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
So those are my 3 big points, unless there's anything else you want to talk about.
Well, I mean, just touching a little bit on the whole process of timing.
For applications or for comp
Yeah,
plan?
I think oftentimes, like, the last packets didn't get to us until Friday, if you happen to get into City Hall, before the storm. These, we had seen them before, so, there wasn't anything big, but I think just the timing aspect of it, and Wayne and I talked about it, when the applicant's gotta get the paperwork into the city, and then, they do their thing. And I think that there's some way we got to make sure we get everything, I'd like to see it, and many times, we get it a week ahead of time, the Wednesday before, but their timelines are really tight. But if maybe somehow you push your timeline, the applicant's gotta get to you, I'm not exactly sure what the exact dates are
Yeah.
for your thing, but maybe say, okay, instead of a week before, 2 weeks before the planning board, maybe they gotta get them to you 3 weeks before.
Yeah.
I don't think that would really mess anything up.
Does that screw up the TRT meetings and that sort of thing?
So the thing with any of that, unfortunately, like so much of the process is set in the ordinance, so we'd really need to amend the ordinance in
Oh, all
most
the timing.
cases to deal with some of those timelines.
Yeah.
Because just to give you all a sense of, so the application deadline right now is 3 weeks prior to the meeting. It's 4 PM on a Thursday, so really the very end of the day. And then by like noon on Monday at the very latest, we need an agenda into the newspaper. So I've got that day to like grasp whether it's substantially complete. So a week after the deadline, we hold the TRT meeting. And then the Tuesday after that is at noon when the applicant can resubmit things. So we kind of struggle with, is there something that's not there that they can get us between, we identify it as lacking on Thursday and the Tuesday before we get packets together for you, ideally on Wednesday, but usually it's more like Thursday or Friday, prior to the meeting. So a lot does get cleaned up in those couple of weeks between submission and what you receive. But it is all very tight, and so, we certainly can, there are things we can change. It needs some thought and working it out with, because we have to meet certain notice deadlines, we have to send letters to abutters, and,
Well, maybe one thing,
but I have a couple ideas.
yeah, because we seem to struggle with what's a complete application. And her spreadsheet, may have incomplete, and there may be some minor issues that, okay, even though it says incomplete, okay, we can work with it. But now, this one, obviously, when they appeared last month, was incomplete. So maybe to avoid that, and to make sure they submit the correct information to you, you put more of a burden on them, that if it's incomplete, if there's too many of these boxes that say incomplete, that,
Yeah.
It is.
it's not coming to the board.
So my first idea that doesn't need any ordinance amendments, would be to basically incorporate that checklist into the application form itself. And the applicant has to go through and say, yes, I did it, and maybe even, here's where it is. Or if they think it's not applicable, they put NA, and I can then zero in on that and decide whether that seems reasonable or not. So that would make it a little bit faster than trying to flip through an entire application to kind of generate the checklist before it's even time to review the project. It gets tricky, especially with the varying applicability of things. So, that's my first idea, and then,
And I think that's a good one, putting stuff on the,
That's
on
the
the, on the
easiest.
applicant is really okay, because the thing is, whether they're explicitly using your checklist or not, they really are. I mean, because they're
Right.
saying, okay, here I go, and if they're not sitting there with something, checking off, then they don't deserve to come here anyway. But I mean, they're gonna know all that stuff, for example, what page is such and such on, or whatever.
Yep.
So,
Yep, so that's step one, and then I think the timeline that we have right now with deadlines and reviews and resubmission opportunities, that was designed with an intention of offering a quick way through the process. I think and maybe even Laurie has some insight on that, like, it was staff taking on the burden of being business friendly and making sure that it could work as efficiently as possible. It's not the only way to do things, and so I've thought, we could keep that. This gets administratively difficult, but you could keep that process and kind of add another track option, or direct more people toward, if it's a complex project, or if they anticipate a lot of waivers or what have you, come to TRT first before you make a true application. And have that kind of informal review before we really kick off the process. Because sometimes, most of the time I know what's coming before the application deadline hits, but sometimes things appear out of the blue that you had no idea were coming, and you have no familiarity with them at all, so.
and there is we've had a couple times when we have done a review for comment only, I mean, before the preliminary, right? There is
Sketch plan
sketch
review.
plan.
Yeah, sketch plan, I knew there was a word.
But we can also just, with our staff, do a conceptual,
Oh,
technical
and I
review.
agree, yeah.
That probably should have a fee attached to it, because it is time and effort that we're putting into the review. So, I mean, with the whole solar question, we're going to be making amendments this year, unless you say, city council, this is it, we're not changing anything, but, so, where those will be focused on Articles 8 and 3, I was thinking about that anyway, like, it's an opportune time to look at any other things that are lacking. But there's no reason we can't also look at Article 6 and kind of refine how that's dealt with. And even some of it needs to be in ordinance form, but some of it, policy process doesn't necessarily need to be in the ordinance. So you can kind of look at what needs to be there and maybe what is hampering us by being in ordinance form.
Another thing, I'd like the board to, I mean, this is probably one place that John and I disagreed in the preliminary review. Because it says, the intent of the preliminary plan meeting is for the administrator to make a determination of completeness of material submission, as well as identify issues and constraints that must be addressed in the final plan meeting. So, I mean, not just say, okay, it's complete, you gave us the information, but to ask, like tonight, ask all the questions that we want, either the staff to answer or the applicant to answer, and get it to them, before, instead of just asking them at the final meeting. Because that's one thing that bugs me, is, you may have a very important question, and you're asking them at the final, and either you don't get really the information you want, or you could turn it down, but, so, hit them with every question you've got at the preliminary, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And that gives, like I say, if we got questions for staff, or we want to provide better information.
Oh, and I
Right.
make note of, when
Yeah.
you say something like, I would be very favorable to a 9 PM hour of operation, I'm like, let's talk about that when this comes back to staff next month. Like, make sure that that's what they're planning on, if that's the indication you're giving, you know? So,
I was quite surprised, I'm quite happy, he was happy to do the cement curbs.
Yeah, that was, I was surprised.
yes. There's at least
I
that.
mean, because the public works person had signed off, right?
Hmm?
I think Lisa signed off on asphalt curbs.
Yes, there were other department heads there that were in favor of granite or concrete. I won't mention
You
any
know the
names,
inner
but-
workings so much better than I.
All you gotta do is ask.
And if I do something wrong, feel free to say.
Really?
That's, well, I know you're gonna.
One
I
other,
want some guidance from Patrick.
Well, yeah, no, he actually knows stuff,
I
right?
know it.
one
You
other
did great, you
thing,
did great first meeting as chair.
something that has come to mind, you know, we've been incorporating Zoom again just because of our new policy and, but we've always, or for a number of years, we've broadcast meetings to the local cable channel and then onto YouTube and then onto Facebook in a live format. And so do all the other boards and commissions that have the benefit of live video recording, so the council, the Board of Appeals. I think that's probably it for city ones, the school board. The school board went off of Facebook. And I don't think we have any clear policy of how that became the practice. So absent a clear policy, just something to think about, just the planning board. I witnessed people commenting on the Facebook video of this meeting, and I don't think it serves any positive purposes. This is, all it does is provide, I don't know, a place to be angry, argue, like.
I totally understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
At the same time, you don't really hear from people who just say, oh, yeah, look, watch that, it was really interesting, I learned some stuff. And they are not making any comment whatsoever, right? So I don't know how you figure out whether there are enough people in that camp to overcome the ones that are just there to make trouble or,
I
you
think,
know,
I
have
think
their
there are,
agendas.
if this is something we wanted to look into, I do think there are good analytics that can be applied on that platform that can tell you, this is how many people viewed, this is how many people viewed the
At the
whole
time,
thing, this is
yeah,
how many
yeah,
people
yeah.
viewed a subset, and that would get to your answer.
Sure,
Well, if
right.
1,000 people viewed, but 5 people had really negative comments.
And they're the same
Well,
5 people
you know.
every week. I mean, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way
But I
it
think
happens
it
with
would take some
council,
work
right?
and research, but I do believe there are analytics that, I don't know
I
if
bet
they
there
cost
are.
money to get into the analytics, that may also be a thing, but I believe they're there.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be great, personally.
And, you
I
know.
mean, if you really want to follow through with whether or not you want to, you know, maintain a Facebook presence or whatever.
Right. I mean, it's on YouTube. There's just no commenting allowed on YouTube. And
I don't think Facebook serves any positive purpose.
right.
Period.
This topic or
Society,
else.
but I would-
elsewhere.
I don't think we need, we already have it on, it's on the website of the town, city, right?
The videos?
Can't you post
Yeah.
videos to the
The
city?
the YouTube link is.
And if you can
embedded.
post it all to other places, I mean, maybe that is a sufficient, for the person who's really,
Yeah. I mean, we can still post the YouTube link to Facebook when it goes live. It's live on YouTube as well. So I think it's just
I think it's the convenience of the thing. If you put it on Facebook or a
Yeah.
platform like that, you're going to get more views for better or worse.
right. It's just those views should be purely a one-way communication.
Great, yeah, if there's a way to shut up.
I was gonna say,
comments,
can't you
might
do
be
that?
able
Yeah,
to
that
do
actually,
that.
you can probably do that.
I'm pretty sure you
Well,
can.
I mean, there's no requirement that we allow them to comment on Facebook under FOA, so
right,
You can
because
just-
you're not taking that in.
We're not, so yeah, you can just turn off comments on Facebook if it's a way to give it
Now I
to
have to go
people.
look at all the Facebook comments.
Right, my opinions on this are based on the transmission of the meeting content, not the dialogue that may happen on the other end.
Yeah, so
Right.
yeah.
And I think the more mediums that we can, and the more modalities that we can use to transmit the content is just generally good. The question about what the mosh pit looks like on the other end is a different conversation.
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted to know your feelings on, so.
And if they
Just
really
putting it out
wanted
there.
to make a public comment, they would either come here or Zoom in, right?
Right,
So,
when Zoom is available,
Mm-hmm.
it won't always be, but yeah, I think, I don't know, I feel that in lots of ways, it could be a newspaper article somewhere completely different, but that people get that urge to express themselves out and don't participate, like, whereas if your only option is to come here and participate, maybe you actually do it. And then the comments are meaningful because they are heard in the proper forum, right?
Just basically, a lot of the comments are just people whining.
Yeah.
But shutting off the comment thing is, I mean, that's real.
think that's an
I mean,
option.
I
pretty
think it
easy.
is. I think it, I don't know, IT's looking at it because it might be different with live videos, but, so, just wanted to throw that out
And that's
there.
completely separate than if somebody actually wants to speak as part of the public hearing, we can still hypothetically provide that mechanism. That's different than just an open forum chat room.
Yeah. And I mean, if somebody showed up here wanting to just talk about planning stuff, that doesn't, I mean, that's not the purpose of the meeting either. You have public hearings specific to the applications before you for affected parties to comment on, so it is still, it's different than what happens online, but I don't know, it's just been concerning me, so.
don't let them get to you. They're all trolls anyways.
Oh, we're probably still alive, aren't we?
That's
You're
all.
tweeting me right now.
I was curious if
anyway.
you're gonna hire a new alternate, or hires maybe not the
Oh.
right word, but
Advertise.
advertise.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, is that gonna be on next month's agenda?
I'm trying to see if it can be, it's not clear to me what the clerk needs in terms of documentation or a recommendation, so I was
I
trying to
think
figure
just
that
a
out.
recommendation.
Yeah, it's
from
my
you.
recommendation that you
Yeah.
become regular, and I think that the
Take my
board,
fingerprints. Have whatever you need.
Mugshot.
it only makes sense, and then,
Yeah.
and then we can advertise, so I would hope that we can have an appointment at the April council meeting at least, for probably not till a May planning board meeting at this rate.
Well, you could get her on the March agenda?
Definitely for
Yeah.
the regular, well, yeah, we
Yeah.
should be able to, yeah.
This is basically to advertise for people that are interested and set up some interviews.
Yeah, yep. We also have to advertise, there's a vacancy on the Recreation Commission and a couple of vacancies on the Historic Preservation Commission. So I kind of provide some support, well, I provide some support for sure to the Recreation Commission and then somewhat to the Historic Preservation. So I think I'll advertise them all at once, hopefully sooner
Sure.
than later.
I guess the thing to do.
Yeah. It'd be nice if we just had kind of a page on the website that said whatever was open.
Well, you're gonna have to, I mean, not too far down the line, you're gonna start advertising for people who are interested in these comp plan committees too.
Indeed,
so-
we will.
So you wanna, I mean, you wanna get that as separate from this other stuff as
Yeah.
possible, actually.
Yeah. So we just gotta get planning board designated and then we can work on the steering committee portion as a subcommittee.
Time to go home?
Yes.
I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Yes, sir, I make one of those.
Second. All in favor?
Oh,